I'm going to talk about the battery connection cable today and how I had to end up replacing it. This little connection here is pretty delicate and it fits really tight on different batteries, and when I pull it loose, eventually the little black plastic piece came off there, and I ended up cutting it off because it was just hanging there. And then eventually, wear and tear, I just kept bending the wires, it's being as delicate as I could, but eventually the little connector broke, and you can see here this is one that broke on me, and the connections just aren't really that big. You'll need to go out and get one of these new connectors, and they're only about $1 or $2. And the first thing you'll need to do is go ahead and trim this back about 1/4 of an inch or so. You'll cut your wire, determine the length that you need, and then you're going to need to strip both sides with adequate room to be able to make your solder joint. Now, one of the things that I did is I made a tool to hold my wires, and this is merely just a inside of a piece of a cable from off your cable TV. There's a copper wire in the middle, and if you strip out the outer side, you'll find that there's a copper piece in there that's wrapped in this tin foil, and I use it to kind of make a spring clip. And the reason I did this was because as I solder these wires together, I can clip one side to here and stick this other wire down in there and get them to where I can get them to touch and to solder them. Now I use a little piece of wire tie to wrap around here to hold this in to whatever length that I need. So that's kind of a handy little tool that you can make at home. Just grab a piece of cable and strip it out, and it comes in pretty handy on my soldering jobs. Now, once you have everything in place to do your soldering job, you need to make sure that you're using some soldering flux. That's really important if you're kind of new at soldering. This stuff you put on the end of your wires, and you dip your soldering gun in it, clean off the tip. But this stuff is really what makes the soldering, flow well onto the wire itself. So don't forget that. I've tried doing it without it and realized that it just doesn't work. Now, another thing you need to remember is before you go ahead and use your clip and connect the wires together and get ready to solder, you're going to want to take some pieces of shrink wrap tube and put it on the wire before you solder, because you can't get it on afterwards. And just find a tube that's the right size, cut off a little piece, and slip it on before you do your soldering job. And then after you complete your soldering job, you'll slip the tube up over the joint and apply some heat to shrink the tube around it. I use a little match way below it, so it's not a real extreme heat, but it'll shrink right around your soldering joint. And once you've shrunk that tube up, you're all complete and ready to go. But here's where I made my big mistake. After I got it all done, I wired it up, plugged in my battery into my Heli, and as soon as I did, the blades started turning. I was like, whoa, what happened? I unplugged it real quick, and I had been doing some other work on my unit, so I thought, well, maybe somehow I damaged the 3-in-1 board. And so I kind of plugged the battery back in, and sure enough, it started spinning again. All of a sudden, it started smoking. The battery got really hot, and I was like, what's going on? And again, after trying to evaluate any board problems or anything, I started thinking about, well, did I wire these backwards? And sure enough, I got out my meter and I checked the terminals and of the old unit that I had cut off here versus this one, and I had wired black to black and red to white. I just assumed black would be black and red or white was, the odd man out. but they were actually wired backward or differently. So I'm not an electrician or anything, so I don't know what the red wire means except hot, but to me it was black on black. So wherever you buy this, I don't know if it's standard, but I would go out and I would get your meter out and check for resistance and make sure that you're making your connection the right way. Luckily, after tearing it all apart again, cutting it, resoldering, re-putting the shrink tube back on, I plugged it all back in and the heli worked fine. I had not damaged the board and I was able to fly as normal. Now the other thing is, again, this connection here is just so delicate and so small that I didn't want to have to redo this job again. So what I did is I went ahead and got out the good old JB Weld and coated an area right around here. And here's the heli that I ended up actually doing this particular fix on. And you can see I got my shrink tube on there, but I ended up using the JB Weld to coat that so that that never breaks off again. It's nice and stiff, and so as I pull, I'm not pulling on the wires, and so that should really take care of any future break, that I don't have to redo this whole job again. Now what I did do with the JB Weld though is, as I mixed it, I let it dry or cure for at least 30 minutes, maybe even longer. I just stirred it every once in a while and let it get thick, so that when I did ended up applying it here, that it didn't just ooze off as it dried. So you might want to let it cure a little bit and get stiff, and that should take care. And make sure you don't get any JB in these little holes, and where it might clog up and not let your battery be pushed in all the way or something like that. Thanks for watching.